thanks again. Thanks, Howard. Over to you.
Excellent. Thank you, Paul. And Paul, both of you keep me occupied on video. Good to see the interaction. Okay, so this is an interesting one. It's been a really enjoyable journey in terms of trying to distill what data quality is all about. And I'm sure so many of us have heard data quality. We've heard, Esti, how are you doing? We've heard all of the different ways of dealing with data quality, data profiling. And we've got Dai here, who's one of the leading trainers and specialists in data quality. So we really look forward to discussing the essential concepts. Now, please remember, this is essential concepts as defined by the DMBOK. I've added some enrichment to it, but generally I'm taking what's in the DMBOK and trying to explain it. We all know that there are things that are missing from the DMBOK or issues and stuff like that, but for me, it provides a really good framework and a good place to start. Okay, so as normal, we want to deal with the essential concepts for everybody. I tend to spend the first session a bit more detail time on the first session when we deal with it. And then we do the data management today, and that's managing trust. We then next week we'll do data citizen, data professional, and data executive. All right, so look forward to going through those different elements. So how do we build trust? And I think it's one of those things that I always relate to from a personal point of view, or just as an individual, that if I let somebody down, or I break the trust of somebody in my ability or in my capability or in whatever I do, I don't just fix it tomorrow, and I can't just say sorry. There's still that level of trust building that has to go on until they get to a point where they can commit. And if I promise to have the deliverable by tomorrow or the next week, then they can bet themselves that they'll actually have that deliverable. So the same way as we take time to establish trust with each other, so data is going to take time to establish trust within the organization. And I've seen that so many times when I build data warehouses. One thinks everything's great and all the numbers are making sense. And then people start clicking on things and they don't always balance and they don't always aggregate and roll up properly. And then the guys say, oh, shucks, I'm not sure about this data. And then it takes almost as much time as it took me to build the data warehouse. It takes the same amount of time to establish the trust in the data. So you're almost looking to get to maybe version 2 of the data warehouse before everyone is comfortable with what it's saying. So it is important. And data quality is there. And I feel that very similar to the discussion we had yesterday about privacy by design, we should have data quality by design. We should make sure that we model data quality, we plan for data quality, we deal with all the different aspects of data quality. And I really enjoy this video, and I hope that you can all hear it. So I may terminate it if it goes on for too long. Paul, would you just confirm that you can hear it when it starts playing?
No. It's not coming through for me.
We can see, but not hear.
Sorry, so it's not coming through. Was it not coming through, guys?
No.
Okay, so let me just stop sharing, and I did start sharing with sharing sound, but I'll try it again. Include computer sound, and there we go. We'll try that again.
Now, he says his home
is better, Paul?
he made a drafty.
Got it.
It's worth around $121,000. Early in 2005, however, somebody, they don't know who, went into the county's systems and accidentally changed the assessment value of his home to $400 million. Later in the year, a somewhat surprised Mr. Charnetsky received a property tax bill of a little over $8 million. He called, he asked if he could pay in installments. They laughed, corrected the figure, and sent him a new bill for around $1,500. So far, so good. Unfortunately, in the meantime, that $400 million figure had been used by all of the different cities in the county. In particular, it was used to determine the budget. The result was, at the end of the year, because Mr. Charnetsky hadn't paid his $8 million, they were left with a huge hole in the budget and had to implement emergency cost cuts. In particular, the school district had to return $2.7 million, which resulted in the elimination of all optional activities, including school trips, sports, new books for the libraries, everything. This resulted in some very grumpy children, some very grumpy parents, a general scandal, and resignation of the people responsible. There are two morals to this story. The first is that a single bad value can very easily get into different information systems. The second is that data quality can have real human consequences. So please, for the sake of the children, think about data quality in your next project.
Okay, so that was quite an impactful error that was made. I don't know if any of you guys have ever experienced an error like that, but it sort of makes sense, right? So you, with all this planning and with all that money that was available, then they start setting budgets, then they start not reaching those budgets, and then what do? You know, does that one data quality error that for somebody's house, how does it go back and redefine your budget? So it was quite something. So and yeah, Mark, I'll certainly share the video with you, but a really nice one to recognize how important it is. So why do we do data quality? What are our goals? And I found these both the goals and the business drivers to be very insightful. So what we're trying to do is develop a governed approach or an engineering approach to data to make data fit for purpose for the data consumer's requirements. Okay, so we want to ensure that whatever requirements the business have with data, that the data that we have and that we possess is accurate enough, it's complete enough, it doesn't have the challenges of uniqueness, it rolls up properly, and it needs to meet their requirements. And so to do this, we define standards, requirements, specifications for data quality controls as part of the data lifecycle. That's important. So every single step of that data lifecycle, we have to understand what are the data quality requirements. And I wonder if any of you guys, if we look at the plan and design phase, because most of the times when we talk about data lifecycle, people start off with create, when we create the data, and we don't pay attention to the plan and design. So anybody have an idea of how do we apply data quality to planning and designing?
Well, you can plan for quality.
Yeah, but when I'm planning data, when I'm designing data, what do I have to pay attention with respect to data quality?
Yeah, Howard, I think you define the rules.
Yeah, so Di, you're right. So it's actually those rules, those business rules, you know, in terms of let's take as an example uniqueness. We need to plan up front for that uniqueness, right? We don't want to land the data and then try to get uniqueness. So both the planning and the design. So planning is typically in the realms of data architecture, and they would then also look at from a data flow point of view, where is the data coming from, and then also trying to label data as what is representative data and what is an authoritative source. Okay, so if I have transactional data, and I know Paul and I are working in insurance, building a massive insurance warehouse, and we say, well, where do the claims come from? Okay, now we've got 3 or 4 systems that have got different claims. And now we say, well, which one is the right source? And then you may have the horrible answer to say everybody's the right source. And then you've got to merge all this data, and you've now got to create an authoritative source or a representative source of the transactional data and an authoritative source of the master data and the reference data. So I don't know if you guys have seen some of those principles in GAAP. They actually refer to representative data. I'd be interested to know anybody who's actually labeled transactional data or business data as the representative source of data. Where do I go to? Where do I go to define the definition for my financial accounts, my sales, my claims, whatever it is? Where is the source, the trusted source? So the same way as which you deal with it in master data, you can also deal with it in transactional data. Now, these are architectural decisions, right? We don't want people down the road that are busy maybe looking at disposing data to make a decision about where the representative source of data is. This has got to be done up front. So if you're going to get rid of data, or if we're going to retire certain data, then we need to understand which source we're dealing with. Okay. Then the other aspect that we deal with is define and implement processes to measure, monitor, and report on data quality levels. What's important? Which data sources are we going to measure? Why do we measure those data sources? We certainly don't want to measure all data sources, right? Especially if we come into an organization that's bleeding and battling with data. Are we going to go away and say, okay, now we're going to set up a data quality that does every single data source, every single data asset? So which ones do we do, and how do we measure it, and how do we define our quality level? Okay. The other one that I like to refer to as the data citizen responsibility is to identify and advocate for opportunities to improve the quality of the data, okay? Thereby improving the trust of the data through processes and system improvements. Okay. Sorry, one more. Okay, so our business drivers are there to increase the value of business data. And of course, they're there to reduce the risks associated with poor quality data. If you are reporting to a regulator and you report the incorrect data, it's maybe similar to that challenge that we faced earlier on in the video, that you've gone and reported a whole lot of premium returns or anything on your insurance bordereau, and you've reported a lot more money than you actually received, or you reported a lot less. And some implications around that. So then the other aspect is improving organizational efficiency. So if we're going to improve our processes, okay, we better have good quality data. And then to protect and enhance the organization's reputation. So these are really critical and important aspects that data quality plays in the data management realm. Okay, so we keep on talking about the life cycle. How do we apply data quality to our life cycle? And this is a book from Navigating the Labyrinth. I'm sure if you guys see this, that's the first book that comes to mind, that from Laura Sebastian Coleman. Sorry, Paul, you got your hand up?
Yeah, thanks, man. Maybe it's just been a really long week and a long day. But
Maybe.
if you could just help me connect the data quality improving process.
Right. Okay, there we go. There's Mark got the Navigating the Labyrinth book up by Laura Sebastian Coleman. So, Paul, when we look to improve our process and the speed at which the process is operating and all the problems that the process faces, okay, if it's running, you remember some of the people refer to data as the oil that makes that sort of engine turn. You know, if you remove the oil from the engine, which is typically the processes that are running through that, you're going to get stuck. The processes are going to get stuck because they haven't got the right data. They can't move to the next step, and they're battling with data issues as they progress.
Okay, got you. Thanks.
Okay. All right. So yeah, I think that's a big aspect. And one of the things that I realized is, if we look at stakeholders for data quality, your business process improvement people and your business analysts, that's one of the areas that they need to be focusing on, the data quality. Okay, it's not just about trying to cut out, and there's certainly part of that is not just about trying to cut out wasted steps within the process. It's also about making it quicker. And one of the things I learned when very first time when I started to see AI come in, Gartner actually made a suggestion of, for example, how would they improve AI in a mainframe process? Okay, so they couldn't go and bring in the new R libraries and everything into the mainframe because that was all driven by COBOL. And what they suggested you do is you take your process and you look at where the process almost comes to rest. So if you go from step 1 to step 2, is there a place where the data rests at between step 1 and step 2? And then AI can look at that data and then maybe say, well, you know what, we are going to reject the credit for this person right now, let's stop the process. Because we know so much about the flow and the data and things like that, instead of going through the entire process and knowing at the end of the day that you're going to be rejected, well, why can't we reject the guy in the first 10, 15, 20 minutes? Why do we need to wait for 3 weeks before we get told, oh, your salary is not enough, or you don't have enough collateral, or whatever it is? These things tend to go on for quite some time. Of course, there are challenges around that, and we can't just say you're out and AI makes a decision on our behalf. There's some risks around that from an ethical point of view. Okay, so the very first thing when we're doing planning is defining the characteristics of high quality data. So what is high quality data? What are the characteristics of the high quality data? What does it mean to us? What does it mean to our consumers? And typically that is done by a data quality expectation. Now I'd love to know how many of you guys have actually built or defined a data quality expectation to any of the data that you have. Anybody done that? Interesting, because when we look at the deliverables for the DMBOK, there is no such thing as a data quality expectation in the deliverables for the DMBOK. Strangely enough, it's an input, but it's not a deliverable. Okay, so after planning, we look at defining systems and processes to control and prevent the errors. We look at better data models to avoid duplications of the data. We look at not nulls, for example, to ensure completeness. We look at referential integrity. We look at interfaces that stop us from typing in the wrong data, and the validations or the business rules at an entry level as soon as possible. And so we go along the whole data lifecycle, looking at each phase to understand what can we do from a data quality point of view when the data is at this phase. All right, so every single one of these areas have a potential for some form of data quality process. Okay, so what are the principles of data quality? And I really like this first one, and I've always had lots of arguments and discussions about agreeing critical data elements. So how do we determine what the criticality is of the data? Because I'm sure if you take different individuals that use the data for different purposes, they're going to have a different set of critical data elements, right? Or do we think that there is a standard set of critical data elements for everybody? So this is very much based on the perspective and the decision that people are going to make on that data. We're then going to lifecycle management. That's an important principle of data. So we need to manage the data right from the beginning. We need to manage the quality of the data from planning to disposal. We've spoken about that. Prevention of data errors. How do we stop it from happening? It's not so much about a data fix. It's more about the data prevention. Let's stop trying to fix. Let's try to improve and prevent them from happening, because I don't know about you guys, but so many times data fixes cause data issues. Then you fix the data. Then you got the next issue. Then you have another one. Then you got the next issue. So anyone that's done an upgrade or a recalculation, the number of times that it takes several iterations before you fix the problem because you are unaware of other issues. Root cause remediation. So we also have to be careful is when we see an error, don't just go and fix the error. All right? Don't just fix the problem. You've got to understand what is causing the problem and address the root cause. So go and find the challenge that we are facing. I remember just this morning, we've got a big ETL process that's running, and we get an error. And this actually happened yesterday. And I said to the guys, we got an error. They said, no, don't worry, just get it through. We need the backups. And so I quickly fixed the error and let it through this morning. Take a guess what? We had the same error. Same problem. We sit for another half an hour to an hour waiting for the data to come through. Because a lot of the times we just there to fix the error and not actually understand what the root cause is. So governance, of course, data quality is critical, and the governance around that's really important, just in terms of applying governance issues. Standards driven, we need to have certain standards about our quality and measurements around that. We need the objective measurement and transparency, and this is where we come to communication. So we've got to make our data quality transparent. And a simple example I use by making data quality transparent is when you guys build a data warehouse or a data report, how many times do you show the data quality of the data that's gone into the report? Or is that only afterwards when someone says, but I don't think that number's right? Okay, let me go and check the quality. Okay, so how do we make our data quality transparent? How do we get people to understand how to validate the quality of the data that they're using? And then how do we get this embedded into the business processes? Paul, that was something that we spoke about earlier on. And then systematically enforced. Okay, so how do system owners take a level of responsibility of ensuring data quality? And of course, then we connect it to service levels. Okay, so what is the SLA or the service level of data that we are applying these issues to? Okay, so I must admit I've got to be honest on this one. I think about 4 or 5 years ago, I was establishing an EIM project or a program for a company. And one of the very first things we did was understand what pains the customers were facing. And we had almost a 90 to 95% feedback that they had bad quality of data and they didn't trust it. So first thing, okay, let's get a data quality program going. And then first thing you read about the data quality program is what is your critical data? Because we weren't going to do a data quality assessment on all of it. And I think we spent 3 weeks arguing about what our critical data was. That was rather embarrassing in terms of not having clear direction, not knowing how to come in and say to people, this is what we need to focus on, and this is how we define good quality data. There was another story I had when I was asked to profile data and assess data quality. It was almost 10, 15 years ago. I spent the weekend profiling the data. I came back with all sorts of problems. And one of the problems was that I said, this is impossible. I've got a sex on these individuals, and I've got three values. Okay, now today we probably have a lot more than 3. I think the last count was 120 something. But we had M, F, and B. So I thought, oh my goodness, this B is something new. I can sort of have a guess at what it means, but I wasn't sure. And I said, so B is a data quality issue. Is it something that you don't understand the sex of the person, so you'll put both there in terms of that situation? And then someone said, no, you're being silly. We actually had this table was for individuals, and then we upgraded it for businesses, so B stood for business. And I had reported all of these errors as data quality issues, and they all laughed at me, and I was rather embarrassed about that situation. I then learned about materiality. So, you know, do I do a data quality profile on every single attribute or column in the table? And the guy said, no, we don't even use that. So half of the stuff is, we don't use that data. So a lot of my complaining or trying to show people how bad the data was, I said, but that's not a problem. Whatever you're raising is not a problem. And when we spent more time looking at it, the data was of pretty, from an expectation point of view and a purpose point of view, the data quality was pretty good. But I had come in there saying it was useless, and I had to eat some humble pie. Okay, so this is one of the areas that I believe is really important from a critical data point of view, and that's around your business measurement framework. So what data is supporting your business strategy? You really want to pay attention to any of the ratios that are being built that measure your business, and you want to make sure that the data going in there is of good quality data. And of course, certain things like regulatory reporting, you can't send bad reports. Financial reporting, you send a bad report to a CFO and you're going to lose your job pretty quickly. Similar to the video that we had. Policies, operations, and then of course, master data is always critical. So, but what of the 360 fields in the master data are the most important? Okay, so how do we decide this? How do we identify it? And this is something important that we need to set up and establish. Okay, so data quality dimensions, and I'm sure most of you have been through that within the DM bulk. These are the few dimensions that are there. There are a lot more, especially when you get into the Department of Defense. I've even seen people go up to 50, 60 levels of dimension. It's quite interesting when you get programmatically having to validate these things, but you've got to know which are the important dimensions for you as an organization. So when you come in and you establish a data management program, don't go and set up, oh, I want to do all 20 or 15 data quality dimensions, right? It's going to take too long, and it's not going to give you the value. All right, so you have to choose, give me the top 3 data quality dimensions that are going to make a difference. And so you then continue, each time you progress, you're adding more and more dimensions to the system. But that almost requires an initial assessment to see where your problems are and what you're battling with. This was a really good flow diagram and document that was built. And I like this almost separation of these are our data quality dimensions, but each dimension has some underlying concepts. Okay, and each underlying concept has a metric. Okay, so we thought, do we just have accuracy and you have one measure for accuracy? But interestingly enough, accuracy, there are 2 definitions, there are 2 concepts in accuracy. The first one is how well does it measure and match the real world? And the other one was how accurate it is to the data source that you got it from. And they may be different. So if I got, that may be great, I've got all 100 rows that I got from the data source, but in the real world, we've got 500 rows. So it's not very accurate. And I always found that problematic when I was initially starting off with data quality, and I looked at accuracy, and everyone says, yeah, no, we're accurate, we match back to the source system. When you get into surveys and sampling data with statisticians, if you don't match to the real world, you've got some challenges. And the other thing that complicates dimensions is that accuracy has an effect on precision. Consistency has an effect on accuracy. And so you've got these interrelationships between dimensions. So don't think, oh, I just take a dimension and I've got all the answers. You've actually got all sorts of connectors and connectivities between the different dimensions. Okay, so accuracy, for example, just a simple example of precision of data values. Anyone got a good example of that in terms of what they could relate to?
We moved a SQL Server recently from an on-prem Microsoft 2016 SQL Server to Azure, and it treats floating point numbers just a little bit differently. So none of our So
Yes.
none of our sanity checks worked at the end. Some column A on a 300,000-row table didn't equal anymore. It was
Yeah.
only out a little bit, but it messed us up.
It was, yeah, you're 100% correct. So things like rounding, I mean, sometimes we think that, especially because we visualize it, currency in 2 decimal places, but to get it right and to get the rounding right, you actually, in some cases, looking at 4, and in other cases, I did from a financial trading system, I had to go to 23 digits. To get some of the calculations right. And I couldn't believe it, that I had to jump through all sorts of hoops in VBA to actually get that 23-digit precision. Otherwise, my numbers were incorrect. So, and the other one, which is a great demonstration of that, is a GPS location. So every digit on the end of your GPS, you almost go from country to province to city to suburb. And as you add digits, you have to get more and more digits to get to your front gate or your front door. And if you just cut that GPS location by several digits, the impact is fantastic. Not always fantastic, but okay. So ISO standard, DQ ISO standard, that's ISO 8000. There's lots of metadata that helps you implement DQ, your definitions, your business glossary. What is the meaning of that column or attribute? That helps you determine what your expectations are. Okay. So what do I mean by that? And these are my expectations of that data. And if I don't have good meaning, then I've got a problem. So this is the ISO 8000. I'm sure you guys have heard of things like provenance. We've spoken about it a few times. Who is the person giving me the data, and what is their quality, or what is almost their reputation? And I can base the quality not just on the data I receive, but the reputation of the person giving me the data. All right. Data quality improvements. This goes around on the life cycle. What's important to know here is that the life cycle keeps on going. It keeps on restarting. So we got plan, do, check, act, and then we go back. Plan, do, check, act. So keep on going along this process. We keep on trying to find, in terms of the evaluating the alternatives to address the root cause, and we need to find what that root cause is, and then how do we fix it? And especially if we talk about accuracy to the real world, we're not going to fix that overnight. We're probably going to have to look at ways of collecting more data or doing some sort of survey. And they've got this nice term in data quality. I don't know if any of you have heard it. It's called the ground zero truth. So who do I go to? Where do I go to find ground zero of this data? And if I don't go to the right place, then I'm always dealing with proxies. Okay. So then we have these different data quality rule types. So we have definitional conformance. So are we in line, or do we conform to the definition? And these different rules are rules for acceptability of missing values. So how many missing values can we have within a column? How many missing values can we have within a row? And what is acceptable? So please, this is something that you guys also must work on, is when you set up a data quality expectation, the first thing the user is going to say that we want 100%. I mean, if you ask the user how many errors do you want, I guess is, well, I don't want any errors. And you have to work with the person to say that's almost impossible. You're not going to have a scenario of 0 errors. So what is the acceptability there? What is that level of acceptability? We've got format compliance, phone numbers, patterns. We've got value domain. That's almost like we have in terms of reference data. What is our value domain for this attribute? We've got range conformance, mapping conformance, match the domain, consistency rules, accuracy. So you can see that all of these rules are things that you have to discuss with the business and the SMEs of the data. And all of these elements and the business rules, if not applied, what is the resultant data and what is the trust of that resultant data? And it's quite amazing when you go through this discussion with your data stewards, with your data owners, with your SMEs, and you ask all these questions, the number of times that they said, I've never thought of that. I've never realized or I never understood how I'm going to verify the accuracy. And I know Paul and I are dealing with another project at the time where they're collecting data from businesses, and we asked them the question as well, how do you ensure that your data that you've got is accurate? What are you going to balance it to? What happens if they make a mistake? How do I vet it? There's so much value in asking those questions and getting people to think about it. Okay, so common causes of DQ issues, of course, a lack of leadership. There's no one saying how important the data is and how important this asset is to us. So, and we're saying, not people saying that we've got to get this, we've got to get better at this data, we've got to improve our data, and we need good quality data to make good quality decisions. I always remember a lawyer telling me that the person who pens the quality of information and decisions is the CEO. They set the tone for good quality. If they say to you, how did you come to this decision? If they challenge you in terms of show me the data, everybody's going to start picking up on that and have the same challenge to the people below them. If the guy at the top doesn't care and he just gets presented a set of data and they make decisions on the data, then you have challenges coming down the road. Data entry processes, how do we overload that? Data processing functions, incorrect assumptions about where the data is coming from. If I don't have my representative source or my master data, I get incorrect assumptions. Oh, I can just go and get it from here. Or that guy's got an Excel, let's go to that one. System design, not getting the proper planning and designing. And then issues affecting, if we fix the issues, then we create other issues. Data profiling, these are the important things. And guys, there are so many SQL scripts around there. Don't think that you have to go and buy these fancy tools. There's so many SQL scripts that will actually run against the data and tell you what's going on. And I'm sure you've noticed it within self-service analytics. When you open up a data set, people start allocating or explaining to you the number of errors, the number of nulls, the percentages, and things like that. It's actually amazing to see how clever these tools are getting at assessing the quality of the data that you have. Okay, these are the type of data quality routines that you do: data cleansing and scrubbing, data enhancements, adding attributes to get better quality, data parsing, splitting the data sets up, and looking at formatting them so they make more sense, and then transforming the data to get it into the right format. And I know Esty is busy with a presentation that she's going to give for SAIIE about the trust transformation. So how do we get trust by transforming the data properly? Okay, so if we go to our DQ activities, this is an area that I was talking about a bit earlier on, is we see data quality expectations as an input, but does anyone see where it's provided as a documented deliverable? So nowhere in the DMBOK do we actually say, well, these are the expectations of this data set. So we never document it, we never create the metadata about what our expectation is. So if we are going to look at improving and measuring the growth of our data quality, what are we going to do it against if we don't have that well documented? So from a data management point of view, these are the areas that I believe the data management needs to pay attention to. What is high quality data within this organization? What is our data quality strategy? And identifying the critical data, because you're going to get people that argue about what data is important and what data is not important. Esty, you're on mute. I can't hear you. Or
Again.
no,
Okay,
I can
cool.
hear you.
Okay, cool. So almost like if you don't have ahead of time, don't know when data is good enough, then you don't know when to stop. So when can't get to 0 errors, Like,
Mm,
unless the
yeah.
data set has like 20 values in, but like large data sets won't have 0 errors in.
You know, you'll never get to 0 errors. So you do have to know when you've got what people refer to as a fit for purpose. So what is my purpose? That I'm using the data for that purpose. What is my expectation? What does it translate to? And when I get to that, that's it. I'm done for this cycle.
Yeah, you could later on then next
Yes.
phase say we want to do it better. We're
Yes.
first going for
Yes.
70%, and then you
Correct.
might be going for 80.
100%. That's important. Okay, so there's the data manager. Then they're also responsible for reporting on our data quality. Are we improving? You've got to sell this thing because it's a cost, it's a mission, it's a pain. You're getting people scrubbing data, you're getting people fixing data. It's not a pleasant job. It's something that I would probably not survive in too long. Ooh, my battery. So, okay, so that's what they've got to do. And through that, they get the deliverables of a strategy and a framework, a program organization. The manager must establish that program. And then we look at the data quality service level agreements to reach the high quality data. And of course, the data manager should be responsible for those expectations and managing those expectations. Are we getting better at that? So here is just a simple example. I put in what I do in my USS Bridge and my data warehouse design. You can see here I've actually built a data quality expectation where I sit with business and I sit with the SME and I say for this fact table on this dimension. So I'm looking at exchange rates for my actuarial basis. What is the minimum level of completeness that I need across the entire data set? And what is the target level? Okay, so if my new data comes in and it drops below 70%, I should be saying to the customer, this is not fit for you making decisions on this data. You should not make any decisions with this data in this current form. When I get to target level of 90, I can stop. That's sort of what you were asking, Esty. When do I stop this thing of trying to reach the 100%? So that's completeness. Now, accuracy, on the other hand, is, and especially if I'm talking about accuracy, does it match the source? There I want 100%. Okay? I shouldn't allow data to go through to the warehouse if I haven't got everything that was contained in the source. So depending on the dimension, you'll define a different level. And this is the discussion that you have with the business users in terms of trying to build that expectation. Both for every single dimension you have, you've got to document the expectations. Same with uniqueness. Guys, I shouldn't have duplicate rows in my database, but how many people have enforced a unique key on your database so that you pick it up, and a business key? I'm not talking about a primary key that the database allocates it. What is the business key and is it unique? Does it have a uniqueness element on it? Okay, so that's the essential concepts, and I took a bit longer in this time just to explain those concepts. It's applicable to everybody, so next week we won't go into all of it, but this is the foundation of data quality. So now let's look at managing trust. So how do we bring about this trust within our data? Okay, that's our responsible. So I'd like to take you through this simplification that I've been working on for quite some time in terms of this thing of high quality data. Okay, we all know that ISO even defines it that, for example, a Mercedes-Benz is not always high quality. It may be over-engineered. It may be too much. It may cost too much. Okay, so a Volkswagen, when you're a student, may be ample and may be the high quality for you at that point in time. Now, maybe when you're down the road and you've got all sorts of children and stuff like that, then you may need to pay attention to the fact that your car doesn't crumple when it's involved in an accident. So it is fit for purpose. So high quality data is data that is fit for purpose based on the consumer of the data and their decision-making requirements. Okay, so what are their decision-making requirements and what is the purpose of that data? Okay, so what is fit for purpose? And that fit for purpose is data that I can demonstrate meets the consumer's expectations. And I showed you that example of what is my expectation of accuracy, what is my expectation of uniqueness, what is my expectation of consistency. Okay, so what is data quality all about then? If we take those as an important element, right? Data quality management is data expectation management. It's about managing the expectations of my data. Is there a typo there on the previous slide? Sorry. Yes, you're right. Okay. This to me, if from a manager's point of view, if they describe data quality, what is it that they're doing in the organization? They're managing the expectations of data that the consumers have on their data. So that is an important area to understand. So how do we get people to trust the data? Okay, so to get people to trust the data, we have to make sure that the data is getting better at meeting their expectations. So if we measure our accuracy level and we 60 at the moment, but they require 70, we have to get it to 70 and higher if possible. That's when we get that level of trust. Now, the unfortunate thing is that better data leads to better insights and stronger decisions, which lead to higher expectations. Right? No, now I can answer this question. Oh, but what can I do with that? And so we go around again. Okay? So you may think that you've hit 60% and 70%, and that was good enough, but it may not be good enough in the next 6 months. And that's why data quality is all about going round and round the circle forever and ever. Amen. Until we get to a point that they will no longer use the data or they'll no longer be making more informed decisions. Okay, so when the data manager establishes a data quality practice within the organization, one of the important things to realize is that typically the lack of data quality is the primary reason for establishing enterprise information management. That's probably the root cause as to what led them to hire you as a data management professional or as a data governance professional to establish enterprise information management. And I did share that story with you earlier on almost 5 years ago when I came into an organization. Their biggest challenge was data quality. That's what got them to spend money. That's what got them to buy into this data management issue. If all the data was fine, we probably wouldn't have data management professionals. So in recognizing that, can we really separate data quality and data governance? Can we keep these two things separate? If we are about establishing trust, if we are about ensuring regulation, if we are about doing that thing, how do we separate these two elements? And then the next challenge that we must be aware of is data quality is impacted by all the other knowledge areas. So metadata affects data quality. The quality of metadata affects data quality. Document and content, qualitative assessments of how the business is operating contained within documents affects data quality. Our stakeholders, and I really like this separation of when we look at stakeholders, we can group our stakeholders into those that are concerned about vulnerabilities. What is my exposure to risk within the organization? So it's the internal auditors, it's the risk managers, it's the security people. They're looking at the vulnerability of this business to bad data and challenges that they face. And then we've got process improvement stakeholders, the business analysts, the business trainers. There's nothing worse than training on a system or training something and the quality of the data is bad and the things don't operate the way they should operate. And then we get into critical data management. And that's where our master data owners come in. These, a lot of the times, I see these as our enablers, our data owners and data stewards. They enable data quality. Okay, so how does data governance support data quality? And I find the most important thing that the data governance people do is when they establish their data strategy, one of the first things they're going to start fighting with are the urgent issues, the things that are keeping it separate, the things that are stopping them from going to AI and doing all sorts of fancy extrapolations and exploratory analytics is because the data hasn't got the right quality. So we need to get that urgent data strategy going, fix the problems with the data as soon as possible. Then you can go on to the fancy things like all the fancy BI and data warehousing and things like that. You've got to fix these data, you've got to fix the problems with the data. Then we got to get the practice establishment, principles, policies, procedures, technology. Without that, you're going to battle. And of course, because data governance must focus on communication and awareness, so we will focus on what is our critical data and sharing the knowledge of our critical data. And then, of course, it's about performance measurement and understanding how we're progressing from a maturity point of view. That's how data quality gets in there, and data governance sort of will help bring that thinking into data quality. Okay, so these were just some of the areas on defining high quality data. High quality is fit for purpose. We've spoken about that. People, we should be doing a readiness assessment. So is the organization ready to do data quality? Don't just think that you point out the problems and you come along and analyze it and say everyone's ready to go and fix the problems. It may not impact them. So why do I need to fix it? Why do I need to allocate business resources to fix the problem? Okay, ask questions of stakeholders to determine what are their challenges, their weaknesses and threats relating to data quality. So if I look at a business SWOT in terms of making a decision and I've got a weakness due to bad data, you've got to bring it in. And then what are the benefits of getting higher quality data and what is the impact of poor quality data? So can you prioritize it? Your data strategy must prioritize these issues, and you can then start addressing it and aligning these fixes with program initiatives. And you want to get them working together, not just on its own, but working with other programs and initiatives that are working within the organization. Okay, so this is really a data quality strategy. Understand the needs, identify the critical data, look at the business rules, what are the quality standards that I need, assess the data according to expectations, share the findings. Guys, this is what you expected, this is what you're getting. Do you see the problem? Do you understand why we're making so many mistakes and so many bad decisions? Then prioritize the issues, identify the opportunities, measure the feedback, manage the metadata, of course. So whenever you run a profile, where are you storing the results of the profiling? And then how do you compare the profile that was done 6 months ago to the one that you've got at the moment? And then start to integrate real-time data quality. So if you're doing a drop-down box, or if someone's typing a name or an address in an open text field, you want to pick up that at the time that the person enters it. So can you do a quick Google lookup and say, this is what I don't believe your address, it's not right. Okay, we've spoken about critical data and business rules, and that's it for what the data manager needs to do in establishing a data quality practice. Any questions, any comments?
If only it was as easy as it sounds while you're talking about it.
Exactly. I'll take 2.
The principles are always easy. It's the execution and getting the people and seeing the right expectations. And a lot of times, you know what I loved about my first data quality project, it must have been about 15 years ago. When you start to bring in a methodical and an engineering approach to data quality and to your data, just the trust and the respect that you get from that process is phenomenal. And people then recognize what they're not doing and what they haven't done, and they see why the data is in the mess that it's in at the moment. So I think it's about establishing that trust, as I think I tried to say earlier on, the same way in which we take time to establish trust with people, we're going to have to take the same time to establish trust with data. We don't just get to the 70% of completeness overnight, or the accuracy, or whatever it is. It doesn't just happen, but at least we know how to define what that fit for purpose is and how to define what the dimensions are.
And to be honest about what that looks like, so that when a business sees it, they're not expecting it to be perfect, because ahead of time or in the same dashboard, you're saying, we know that we have problems. These are the exact problems.
Yeah. Yes, I think
Yeah,
that's very
building trust.
important. What I've always liked to do when I go and discuss data quality with a business, and of course the first thing they said, they don't want any problems with my data. And then I'd go around to them and say, but look at all the problems that you've currently got with your data. So don't set it at 100% where your data is currently sitting at 50, 60%. So what is an acceptable level? What is a sufficient level of data quality? Not what is the holy grail and I have everything wrong, everything right. So you can't get there to that level overnight, and one always has to set the tone is that I don't think you're ever going to get there.
Yeah, like managing that expectations as well, like from a fit for purpose. Fit for purpose, that's like to me the biggest thing now, because certain things, if it's not right, it's not a train smash. Other things have to be right. So this is fit for purpose is really valuable.
Yeah, if I'm going to make some important business decisions or measure my business at an executive level or even at a financial level, and my financial ratios are wrong, you've got a problem. I had an example this week when we published, they call it debtors receivable ratio, about how well we're collecting our debt on our debtors book. And I was out by 3%. And I thought, I just did the calculation and I thought, oh, this is quite nice. And we had one of the top execs on that does the credit control look at it and said, but that's wrong. I was like, oh dear. And he said, we a lot less than that. So it was interesting, just that one ratio, how much emotion it communicated and how many challenges we saw with it. Any other questions? Any other observations, experiences? Di, what about you?
Yeah, thank you, Howard. I think for me, what's quite important is to define the targets and the thresholds. I think, as you alluded to, so that we can manage the expectations and strive towards achieving them. Yeah. So it's about the journey. Yeah. And about why it's important. So the critical data. So does this matter anyway? Who cares what the gender is?
Correct. And I think we had a discussion yesterday on data privacy, and I actually quite like that discussion, because someone was saying, if I have a purpose that no under 18 should submit any data, do I really need to know the age of the person, or do I just need to know whether you're over or under 18?
Yeah.
So why should I collect your age when I just got to know that you're over 18 or under 18 and I'm treated differently? So we sometimes we miss the purpose of the data and we go too far.
And I think this is where Papaya has brought a lot of things to light. It's saying, why do you need this data?
Yes.
What are you going to use it for? Never mind the privacy, the security, the quality. It's about the purpose.
Yes, 100%. And if we can just get data quality to support that and keep on banging the drum, What's the purpose of the data? Because when I understand your purpose, then I know what data is needed and the quality of the data for that purpose.
Yeah.
Any other questions, observations? The really easy task of doing data quality.
Data quality.
I have a question.
Sorry?
I have one.
Okay. Yes, Paul?
I have.
Okay, would you mind putting your hands up and then I'll manage it. I think we got like 5 people going at the same time. Okay, Abdul, you the first one. Sorry, Paul, I'll get to you after that.
Thank you, Howard. It is a great session. I have a question based on your experience. Like, is there a change in the data quality process that you are seeing in your experience from RDBMS world to the current big data world?
It's a good question, and what I'm finding is it depends on almost the operational state of the big data. So one of the things that I am learning with big data is when you're exploring the data for the first time, it's actually better not to try to enforce data quality. Sorry, you actually when you try to bring about data quality on a data set that you don't really understand, you can actually break the data. A good example of that is removing outliers. Okay, so if you go and remove outliers, then you've got a problem in understanding the data, because is that outlier false, or is it a bad data quality issue, or is it a thing that really happened and we had a strange scenario? So these are the type of things that we battle with big data on the initial phase, on bringing the data in and understanding it, whereas RDMS is quite different. You actually do the data modeling up front, and you can define your expectations before the data comes in. Whereas big data, you actually need to understand it and recognize it and look at the level, and then you got to start to implement the data quality slowly but surely. So you tend to take a different approach to data quality using big data, or data that's coming externally and from all sorts of different sources.
Great, thank you.
RDMS, especially in the design phase, I design for quality, I stop bad data in, I believe I understand all the requirements. Big data is, well, I don't really understand this data. I need some time to understand it, and if I put too much quality in, I can actually remove the data. So there's the problem with big data. Paul.
So Howard, can you maybe go back to the process of when you want to, just start to implement data quality or practice and so on. And while you do that, so my question is, if you are working for a organization that is going to do practice establishment and so on, those, they from the DMBOK as well, those steps are pretty clear. But they could also be fairly resource and time intensive and so on. If you're working on a project and you want to actually bring some rigor into the process, first just internal and then also to share with the customer, is there a sort of what is a good way to get the foundation laid and to establish the necessary parts without wasting too much time on so a project is time bound, there's a limited budget and so on. You don't have the luxury of putting down the whole thing. But what do you think is a balance point? How do you bring in rigor without, how do you determine that balance? Do you have any advice on that?
Yeah, I think understanding that, or defining this one here, defining high quality data, and almost those what is the purpose of this data and what are my critical data elements, and only dealing with that. Now, I really liked the one experience I had was it actually applied to a business glossary as well. Where do I start with a business glossary? Because it's also massive, and I can spend years doing a business glossary and not deliver. And one of the elements we did was to say, we will just do the business glossary for the KPIs and the measurements of the fact tables. So that's where we started. The very first thing on our fact table, when we were measuring sales or whatever metric we had, that was where we stuck the glossary. That's where you stick your critical data, because that's the thing that's going to be used to make a decision. So what is critical data within this project? Again, within this data asset that you're going to establish, you're going to have a critical data element. Now, what is important to recognize with that is, let's say I've got a ratio of a debtor's aging, a debtor's recovery ratio. That drills down into supporting elements, which may drill down into some other supporting elements. So you've got to look at that chain of elements that feed that ratio, and you've got to protect that chain. Don't worry about too many other things. If that fact table is to answer these questions, then all I've got to ensure is that that fact table delivers the right answers, and I don't go off on that thing.
Yeah, and then from a, I mean, you often promote the idea of P3T, you know, and so on. But so so how formal do you think when you do definition, you know, definition of high quality data and what it is and what it means, if you I don't know what the right word, policify it, you know, how formal do you do it?
Actually, that's a good question there, Paul. And what I do a lot of the times with my practice definition and my policy definition is, from my data strategy themes, what are the principles that support those themes? And then what are the policies that I need to implement the principles?
And again, so in the project context, would you say that select or find the relevant principles that would be most true to your specific scenario, and then pull the policies from there?
Yes.
And again, the format of that, or that artifact, let's put it that way. Again, we're talking project mode. What do you think would be sufficient?
Okay, are you talking about a policy definition in terms of that, or you talk, what is it? What artifact are you referring to there? Is it a P3T artifact? Is it a critical data element? Is it a data quality expectation? So I think your other point is right in terms of saying, if I was going to establish my data quality practice, what would be the core principles that I implement in the beginning? Is that sort of where you...
Yeah.
Okay, and a lot of that would be based on what I believe is your data SWOTs in terms of your data strategy. So with your data strategy, you have your SWOTs. You would then understand which SWOTs are fixed by data quality. You remember that thing of, you get your SWOTs, what is my action plan, what is my roadmap to fix? So if I've got a set of challenges or weaknesses, what is the action plan to fix it, and then use that to prioritize my data quality scope. So do I have 2 data quality dimensions? Do I have 6 data quality dimensions? Do I have 50 data quality dimensions? Which ones are important? That would be defined by what you're seeing and the challenges that your business is facing with data. I promise you, each dimension that you take to implement and enforce and entrench and to try to reach that goal, there's a lot of effort that's spent in doing that.
Yeah. Okay, and so in a scenario where there's no formal data strategy or anything, again, you're in a project mode, would you then follow that same process, but as input, you sort of derive, I mean, you're working on a project, so you would be picking up what there really is. I mean, you'll be able to sort of identify. It's less formal, but the process is still similar. Is that
the process is still similar? You are right. So, for example, if you're talking about this thing, what are the business needs for this data asset that I'm building?
Yeah.
What is the purpose of this data asset? What is critical to that need? All right. What is the appropriate standards to enforce that criticality? So, is accuracy right for this critical data element? According to, does it agree with the real world? Is it important that it agrees with the real world? Or it's okay if I just get accuracy back to the source?
Mm.
Now, I have found that thing of going to the real world it is amazing how big that problem is. What the biggest challenges you face, especially when you do surveys, and it's really nice, we've done some surveys, and then you say, 80% of the people believe the problem is X. And then you ask, well, what was your universe? Oh, it was 20 people. 20 people out of 1,000 data management professionals. I haven't even got a real good clue of what people are needing and understanding. So therefore, accuracy is a lot higher than the source of the data. So it is about, this project has to deliver this asset. What is the need? What is the critical need of that asset? What is it going to solve? What is it going to address? And what are the critical data elements? And the nice thing about it is that you can then add on or really just focus on ensuring that that's what gets delivered. So any other data that's supporting it, is it needed at this time?
Yeah. Okay, thanks.
Excellent. Any other questions?
All good.
All righty.
Thanks, Howard.
Yeah, that's Esti. I know that's actually a good comment on the ins and outs of data modeling. With that, the core business concepts. Those guys, it's actually really nice because from that core business concept, you can identify your representative source and your master data, your authoritative source, on those two elements, and then you need to protect that. You need to protect those elements that you've got.
That's a very valuable thing to add with that, actually, while people are busy with that exercise.
Yeah. Paul, I suppose we can talk on this for hours. I mean, as you said, it doesn't get switched off in a minute or.
Awesome. But if anybody's got any more questions or comments, the post will be out in a day or two, and you can comment there. And also, well, even just in the invite, you can drop your comments or questions, and I'm sure Howard will assist, or the others in the community, or keep it for next week. And if there's enough questions, Q&A, first 1.5 minutes, and then we go.
Excellent. Thanks, everybody.